this is something that happened yesterday, the 21st of September. If you hear this video now and listen to the end of it, I would like you, please feel free to share this video to anyone. Share it broadly, copy it onto Twitter, copy it wherever you want to. But yesterday, my mother, who's 91, switched on her mobile for the first time in about a week, and there was a message left on it by the organizer of a bridge class that she used to go to once a week, not far from us. And of course, the bridge class came to an end when the lockdown started, kind of around February, March 2020, and there hasn't been any bridge until, well, now. And she got this message saying that the bridge class would resume. So she rang a friend of hers who's the same age as my mum, and the friend has been double vaccinated. And she was chatting with her and asking, well, has Eugene, the organizer of the class, said about vaccine requirements? So behind her back, I went and found the phone number of the organizer of the class, and I rang him. And I said, hello, how are you? I said, my name is Christian Morris. I'm the son of Anne Morris, who attends your bridge class. Oh, yes. I said, could you tell me? And I decided to load the question. I said, could you tell me, I said, or could you please reassure me about, that's the word I used, could you please reassure me about the vaccination status that you're insisting upon for those who attend the class? Oh, yes, he said, we're insisting that everybody who attends the class be double vaccinated. Right, I said, I see. He said, has Anne been double vaccinated? Well, I said, that's not your concern. Oh, he said, it very much is my concern. No, I said, listen again now. I said, that's not your concern. I said, because you're not my mother's GP. I said, and you're not privy to my mother's medical history. I said, and I'm hanging up now. Goodbye. So I hung up. And my mother was still on the phone to her friend. So I went in and interrupted them both. And I said, well, here's what happened. And I told my mum and her friend who was listening down the other end. I picked up an extension of the phone and told them both what happened. So my mother's friend said, well, all right. She said, we're just going to have to arrange another partner for me to play with. And I mean, my mother's friend didn't attempt to put any duress on my mum to get vaccinated. So, you know, I was listening into this. So that was that. And about an hour later, I left the front door of the house and I was putting some rubbish out in the skip that we have at the front at the moment. And there was a squad car at the front of the driveway. And coming up the driveway, there was a Garda who I know. So I said, hello, Frank Fay. Yes, he said. He said, is everything all right? Yes, I said, everything's fine. He said, I'm calling here because of a welfare concern. I said, a welfare concern? Yes, he said. I said, is there a criminal complaint or an accusation made? No, he said. He said, we just will call by if we're asked to. I said, who asked you to? He said, the station radioed me. I was out driving the car at the moment. The station radioed me and asked me to call over to just check everything was okay. Well, right. I said, everything is okay. Now, I happen to be acquainted with the guard, so, you know, I think he would probably be satisfied that everything is okay. And he was clear about the fact that there wasn't a warrant or that there wasn't a complaint. So I explained to him the conversation I'd had with that man organising the bridge class. And I then took the guard for a walk around the garden. I showed him the improvements we've had done, because he'd been here before. I had actually asked him to call before, around March or April of this year, to have a chat with my dad about something. So the guard knows me. The guard also knows that I'm being harassed by a neighbour. And would you believe, just as coincidence would have it, when the guard and I were standing in the front garden, the neighbour was driving by and he stopped the car at the front of our driveway and was staring in until the guard and I stared him out of it. So, I don't have a problem with the conduct of the guard. And, you know, I told him, my mother and my father and myself expressly reserve our right to privacy and our right to decide our own medical destiny, including our right to refuse medical intervention. I said, that is the criterion that I use for not wearing a mask. I said, and that is the criterion that we are using for our decision not to be vaccinated. Well, he said, that sounds perfectly okay to me. He said, I'm satisfied now, the guard said to me, that there's no reason, that there's no concern here. He said, you have to understand, he said, sometimes people will ring the Gardaí if they think an old person or a person living alone is in danger or if there's any problem. Well, I said, there's no danger here. No, he said, I know that. He said, I'll leave you now. No, I said, I'd like you to come in and speak to my mother. Well, he said, there's no need for that. No, I said, it would please us if you did that. So I brought him into the kitchen where my mother was sitting, and I left them to it. And I walked out and went down to the garden to have a cigarette. So about a minute or two later, he comes out the front door. He sees me down the far end of the garden up at the gate. And I did that deliberately so that he would see that I was not hanging over my mother's shoulder to tell her what to say. So I left the two of them alone so that she could speak freely to him and tell him whatever she wanted. And I didn't listen in. So he comes out and he says, well, he says, there was really no need for me to go into her. No, I know that. I said, but I'm glad you did. And he and I were chatting a little bit. Then my mother suddenly comes out the front door and walks down into the middle of us, and she says, I want to be clear, she says to the guard, I call the shots in this house, she said, and nobody tells me what to say or do. And there you go. And he smiled at that. So I let him go, and I thought that was actually a really good thing for Mum to come out and say. So we both went back into the house and we sat down, and both my mother and I were quite shocked. And then my father started coming in and we couldn't talk about it properly. So about another half an hour later, I went out to have a cigarette again, and there was a woman standing in the gate. I said, hello. She said, hello. She said, are you planning on selling that bungalow? No, I said. She said, there's been a lot of work going on here. She said, and what's been happening here over the past 2 to 3 months? Well, I said, a whole load of people have been coming here and minding their own business. I said, you might like to take a leaf out of their book. Oh, well, she said, there's no need to be like that. Well, I said, I think actually there is. I said, because at the moment a stranger is questioning me about what's going on in a private home. Oh, she said, is it a private home? Listen, I said, this is not your concern. Oh, well, she said, of course you have the right to privacy. Yes, I said, of course I do. But she said, it's just such a lovely house. She said, we were wondering, who's we? I said, well, she said, myself and some of my friends. She said, I live nearby. I said, what's your name? So she told me her name. And she said, you know, we don't live far away, and we just saw a lot of the things that were happening here. And yes, I said, that's nice, yeah. So I said to her, come in and sit down briefly. So I let her sit down in the front. I said, of course, I said, neither my parents nor myself are vaccinated. Oh, she said, well then, she said, I need you to socially distance from me. Well, no, I said, I need you to socially distance from me. Well, she said, I'll put on my mask. Why are you putting on a mask? I said, what are you putting on a mask for? I said, you got the vaccine, didn't you? I said, surely it's going to work miracles for you. I said, we're the ones in danger. Well, she said, I don't want to put you in danger. I said, that's our decision. I said, this is my house. I said, don't put a mask on like a prat. So then it turned out she knew members of my family. And it's only even talking to you now, I'm realising how she was put up to that. If you look at the construction of dictatorships, they are done not overnight, they're done incrementally. And they are done not just by the police or by the politicians or by the civil servants. They're done by the boots on the ground, by busybody, Renfielding NPCs. And frankly, That is what I witnessed yesterday, read in tooth and claw. I believe that the Garda who called to my house, he was emphasising the fact that he didn't know who had contacted them or what it was about. He was out driving and got a radio signal telling him to call to our house to do a welfare check. Now, I mean, that's valid, because I remember an old man who lived not far from us about 6 or 7 years ago. He suddenly stopped appearing. So I called to the guards. I said, will you just check up on your man? I said, and make sure he's not dead. I said, and don't let me know the upshot of it. I said, I'm letting you know that I have not seen that person around, and it might be worth establishing whether or not he's dead. So they said, you leave that with us. Yeah, we'll do that. They said, we'll just knock on the door and see is everything all right. And I'm satisfied that that's what that Garda did today. Because I know the guard. He's dealt with complaints from me about harassment by a neighbour harassing me. The guard, also that particular guard, he's the community liaison officer anyway. He's called to the house in the past for not complaints, but for concerns that I've raised. So I think he would be fairly satisfied that indeed I'm not an abuser. But my mother and I have reached a conclusion that somebody involved in the Bridge group, now I won't accuse any specific person, but that somebody involved in the Bridge group got wind of the fact that my mother was not returning and decided to drop a dime on us. They are the foot soldiers of dictatorship. They are the foot soldiers of dictatorship, those ones. And we think, and I'm not suggesting that it was Eugene Hackett, the organiser of the Bridge group, we actually think it was a third party, and I won't name names. But this third party called me kind of around Christmas of last year, the end of 2020, just to see how Anne was getting on. And she lectured me down the phone about vaccines and masks for about 10 seconds till I put a stop to that. Nobody's going to lecture us, and nobody's going to ask prying questions about our medical history or our intention. I will not tolerate that. And I'm aware when you're dealing with a situation like this that you draw the line in the sand immediately. You don't think about it. You don't say, well, maybe we'll just allow this, that, or the other. You say, no, it stops now. As the night wore on last night, I made a dinner, and we then watched a programme on telly from 9:30 to 10:30, Opry Duress. It used to be Opry on Ure, but this is now the next series of it, Daniel O'Donnell. And we love Daniel O'Donnell. He's really good, actually, and he had big stars in the show. He had Declan Nerney, who's great. Declan Nerney's really good, really, really good. He had Philomena Begley, who's great. And later on then, Dad went to bed, and Mum started getting angrier. And there was a shift of emotion with both of us where we were beginning to say, no, this really is not appropriate. And that's why I'm now making this video at this time now. It's 5:37 in the morning, just looking at the computer. And I want people to know that this happened. And I want you to share this video if you feel like it, and I want you to tell people. Because sunlight disinfects, and letting the light in and letting people see what's going on, that's the healthy way to respond. That's how you respond to a situation like what I think has happened here. I'm very, very dissatisfied with that. I'm very dissatisfied with what I witnessed yesterday. I believe that the guard... I don't blame the police officer, and I think he was embarrassed, to be honest with you, and didn't really want anything to do with it. But it won't necessarily always be that way. It won't necessarily always be that way. We're looking now at what's happening in Melbourne and how workers, I think, in the construction industry have just put their foot down and said, no, we've had enough of this. And it's the same with us. Is my mother going to take a risky injection for the purpose of being allowed to play bridge once a week in a community centre. Is that what it's about? And you see, this is getting back to my earlier point. A dictatorship is built slowly. And it's built with people saying, oh, sure, look, if I just get that, we'll be able to go back to normal and play bridge. But my mother is now at this stage far too red-pilled. She described talking to two people last week on the phone, and she said how depressing she found the conversation. She said, they've really changed. No, I said, you've really changed. They're the ones who have not changed. They were always like that. Yes, she said, I think so, yeah. So when a 91-year-old woman is having that conversation with me, well, that says, that says enough. We look also at the Joe McCarran thing in Letterkenny. I make no comment in that regard. But it doesn't change. However Mr. McCarran behaved, or his family, or those who claimed to act for him, or those who claimed to act on behalf of his family, may have behaved in that one specific instance, it does not change the fundamental right of my parents and me to our privacy and our right to make our own decisions. And when I say to make our own decisions, I mean free of duress. Any type of duress, positive or negative duress, subtle or overt duress. It does not change that. And there has been a lot of Renfielding and indeed a lot of gaslighting around the Letterkenny thing. The problem with the Letterkenny thing is, like all of these things, we don't actually really fully know what happened or what is happening. So I'm not commenting there, except to say that the existence of what might have happened in Letterkenny, and the way, of course, that the mainstream media have exploited it, of course they have. A vulnerable man being preyed upon by these vaccine cranks. That's, I'm just recounting what's been said in the media there. I'm not commenting on the McCarrans. That doesn't, we're not the McCarrans. That doesn't change our individual rights. You cannot consent to something freely if there's a punishment for not consenting. So to say, well, I consented to get that injection, where the only alternative was losing your job or losing your livelihood or losing access to kids, then that's not consent. Luckily, I don't have any children, I don't have a spouse, and I live with my mother and father. Luckily, we're all on the same page. Luckily. And we have decided to take our risks and not to get the injection in relation to COVID-19. And that's final. I don't even have to say that in this video, but that's it. I haven't minced my words before about it. But I want people at this time now, the time is now 5:42 in the morning, and I woke at about 3:33, and I'm disturbed, frankly. And I spoke to one or two people on the phone, and I want now to bear witness to what I bore witness to yesterday, because these little things are the direction that it can go in. Duress isn't always about grabbing somebody and sticking a needle in their arm. Duress can be subtle. The withholding of a treat, not being allowed to visit people, not being allowed to go to a bridge class. That's duress. Except for the fact that my mother knows it.